So good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're joining from. I'm going to talk about the building blocks for consumer identity and access management. And basically what we're seeing is that consumers are demanding more and more what we call frictionless experiences where security is assumed. This means organizations are looking at their customer journeys, so the way they register, authenticate, and profile manage with those consumers in a way that has to do with the risk profile and the associated friction that we put on them, like things like multi-factor authentication or one-time passwords. And what we're hearing from our clients is that they need help on four key areas. First of all, they want to make sure that they can create this seamless, frictionless consumer journey to ensure that they have the optimum way of people registering and engaging with the brand. The second thing they're asking us for is help us to engage, build, and manage our consumer relationships in a way that creates brand trust, which means how do we create a way to authenticate those consumers no matter what digital touch point they're utilizing, making sure that we build the best relationship possible. The third area is around going to market. So having the ability to go to market faster with technology that supports security by design in a way that we support, for instance, digital transformation or the way we're launching new products or services together with our clients. And the last area they're asking for our help is around driving the operations in a repeatable fashion so that when marketing and offering managers are thinking about a new way to go to market, we're not ending up with another point solution, but that we can reuse the platform and technology of choice and making sure that we can support that use case and then serve the business need. All of this said is that we're providing our capabilities around consumer identity to support business processes of our client. And I try to lay out at least three of those processes to make sure that you understand how repeatable our consumer identity solutions need to be. So on the first row that you're seeing, I've outlined the shopping experiences where we have a landing page, people look for products, they put them in their shopping cart and check out. And guess what? Of course, they need to log in or register and then add their shipping information before going to payment and close out. Same thing for an event registration like this one, right? We want to make sure that we support the identity registration, the consent management, and also the correct profile to make sure that you can attend events like this. And the last example I wanted to give is around a support request, where also, of course, the identity is key with regards to how that flow would go. All of this by saying is that consumer identity and access management influences many different use cases at our clients, and that we want to make sure that we have a repeatable approach to be able to address this kind of use cases. Here at IBM, we've created a pyramid type approach to be able to help our clients with these kind of use cases. So we start off with design thinking, which is basically a consulting framework that allows us to collect multiple stakeholders together and make sure that we have collaborative requirements with regards to how that user experience needs to look like for the typical use case. We work together with our UI UX teams to be able to make sure that we design the screens and the flows that support that user experience. That UI UX design then translates into functional requirements for solution design. And then we can make technology choices with regards to what products we need, but also what services do we need to make sure that we bring it to life. So think about not only the developers of the UI, but also think about the integrations into backend systems like your CRM system, ERP system, e-commerce system, to make sure that they can utilize a single identity across the different touch points. And last but not least, the bottom of the pyramid is how do you drive operational excellence with a technology platform so that the business can execute on the different use cases. So we help our clients with service catalog management, we help them with vendor management, but also with the on-demand responses for new ideas and new business cases and translating that again into functional requirements. As you can imagine, talking to different stakeholders and all of their different agendas can be quite tricky, especially if you try to align, for instance, compliance with your CISO organization, the operational expenditure challenges of a CIO's organization, but also marketing, making sure that the look and feel and branding comes across exactly the way you want it. So what we've created is what we call a CIAM building block approach. The CIAM building block approach is basically allows us to execute against this programmatic approach into addressing every single stakeholders and their needs. So the capture building block is a building block specifically designed for the product manager or the offering manager together with the CMO. So what is the use case that we need to support? Are we doing an insurance quote? Are we doing an event sign up? What is the use case that we need to support? Then what is the experience going to look like with regards to the screens, the flow, but also what attributes are we capturing, right? Are we asking for too much information? Can we spread it out over the consumer's journey, making sure that we are applying progressive profiling as an example? And progressive profiling, just to make sure for the people that are not aware of that term, it basically means that we're asking for multiple sets of information at multiple points of the journey. So for instance, starting with an email address when you sign up, and then asking for a shipping address at the moment that you check out of a shopping cart. The second building block is what we call the engage building block. The engage building block is when somebody signed up, how do they then engage with you? Basically, how do they authenticate with you? So think about the protocols, think about what kind of password rules, what is the level of security that is required with the use case? Are we doing a simple newsletter, or are we actually executing against a financial transaction? Do we need multi-factor? Do we need single sign-on? Those are some of the conversations that were happening in the engage building block, which is typically addressed to the identity organization of your client. The manage building block is basically tailored to the CISO's organization. They have to make sure that the information you're capturing on the engage building block is captured in a compliance fashion. So think about, of course, GDPR, CCPA, and other legislations like Perpetua in Canada or Brazil just came online. We need to make sure that we can execute against what we call data subject rights. That means allowing users to manage their consent, allowing users to edit, delete, or export the data that they've provided, but also understanding, for instance, that data can be shared with third parties or that data is automatically processed. So all of these elements are done in the manage building block, making sure that we address the CISO's needs. The last building block is the admin building block. And as you can imagine, when you choose technology, you want to make sure you do that at the most effective way and that you can support the multitude of use cases that we need to serve. This means that the CIO's organization is looking for how do you provision new apps, new websites, new digital touchpoints, but doing this in a repeatable fashion, where also the skill sets to be able to manage and operate that are not really exotic, right? And what kind of reporting do we need to then provide to our business stakeholders? How do we integrate into those backend systems? But also, how do we set policies around fraud, terms and conditions, and privacy statements? All of those will be addressed in the admin building block with regards to the CIO's organization. So what we've tried to do is basically outline every single one of the business blocks to make sure that you can have the right conversation with the stakeholders. So no matter if you come out of your CIO organization or your CISO organization, or if you're a brand manager, we wanted to make sure that we help you understand some of the agendas and business topics that you can help drive with your other stakeholders. So for instance, on the CMO side, it's really about how do we make sure, for instance, that the look and feel is consistent across the board. Look and feel may feel like a recognizable element to your organization, but don't forget, this has also got impact on, for instance, the trust that your consumers have to be able to enter their password and make sure that they can engage with you. What is the level of friction? And is this more than what you came for? The level of friction, we also look at it in the sense of time to complete. So think about it as, hey, I want to buy a new piece of clothing. What is the time for me to complete the checkout process? Is the registration in line and the execution of my cart in line with the number of friction that I have to go through to be able to get my new piece of clothing? Also touched on progressive profiling, making sure that we're capturing information along the consumer's journey and making sure that we are not asking those long-legged forms upfront and therefore having potentially a high drop-off. So as mentioned, the engage building block is conversations with your identity teams, right? So what protocols are you using? Are you going to go for a hosted experience, for instance, with OIDC, where you can control basically the experience no matter which device or channel they're using. How do they authenticate? How do you provide single sign-on? Do we do device validation? Those are some of the conversation topics we're having with our clients to make sure that we can address their needs. So think about lockout policies or notifications that, for instance, when somebody uses or changes their password, they need to be notified. All these business topics are being addressed in the Engage Building Block. The CISO's organization is really about compliance, as I mentioned, but also making sure that we're minimizing data subject requests. So by providing the capability for consumers to manage their profile themselves and execute against their rights, we're minimizing the data requests that we're getting through call centers, email requests, etc., making sure your organization is not burdened. So how do you provide this level of self-service, and how can you make sure that these processes are predictable and then that your consumers can execute correctly? The last building block, as I mentioned, is the admin building block. So for instance, how do you train people to be able to provide a level of access to the system to be able to execute against their task? One great example is, for instance, a call center employee that needs to be able to look at a consumer's profile and change their address. So how do you provision those roles, and how do you make sure that that doesn't have to do manually, and that you integrate with your IAM solution to make sure that these things are provisioned automatically? Based on the fact that we're also handling front-end solutions and front-end experiences, do you also need Java developers or web developers to be able to make personalized experiences happen versus what we traditionally have within the IAM teams are more identity specialists? So how can we then limit customization and making sure that we create repeatable building blocks also from a technology perspective that support those various different business processes? And last but not least, we'll have discussions around availability, scalability, because consumer identity and access management, if our clients are successful, we'll have higher loads than ever anticipated, and we want to make sure that we can run those. So just to end off, and I know we have a short window today to be able to talk about these topics, I just wanted to pick out also the fact that these building blocks are not only here to help you address your different stakeholders, they are also helping you to address functional requirements in a compartmentalized discussion, which means that when you're talking about the capture building block, you want to make sure that you're following all the high-level functional requirements within that functional building block as well. The engage building block, as I mentioned, are we using single sign-on, for instance, and connecting to external IDPs? Are we doing things like identity proofing when somebody signs up? All of these discussions are part of a structured way to drive a solution for your client that supports the consumer IAM engagement. With that said, I hope I stayed within time, and I'm very open to some questions. The good news is that IBM is here to help for you, and we have a lot of strategic advisors across the globe, and you can also reach me personally. What I've also done lately is about a month ago, we published a Consumer IAM for Dummies book, making sure that we highlight some of our experiences like these building block approaches into a copy that you can utilize to be able to get yourself educated on how we are driving consumer IAM, and hopefully that will be a benefit to you as well. So I'm going to hand over back to our host.